Next up, we have a panel being moderated by Jacki Vause on the privacy-first advantage, smarter data, smarter monetization in 2026.
Hello, everyone. It works. That's good. We're starting well. Okay. Thank you. We're in that sort of graveyard shift straight after food. I hope you enjoyed your lunches. My name's Jacki Vause. I'm the CEO of Dimoso, the greatest PR and marketing company in the world for mobile games and all its suppliers. There we go, my pitch is there. So I'm here with an amazing panel who are basically going to talk to you about the privacy advantage. So what I'm going to get everybody to introduce themselves first, and then I'm going to come back to you guys.
It does work? Yeah, it does. Okay. I hope I'm never the first one all the time on all your questions. Hi, I'm Sofia. I lead EMEA side of advertising for a very small company called Zynga. We've clearly dealt with the subject of this discussion for many years and many years to come. So I did see the presentation before clearly, and I can tell you, like, we really did our best to make this very boring topic a little bit less boring.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bozo. I work as a head of ad monetization at GameBiz Consulting, and I help game studios and app studios around Europe and beyond to increase their ad revenue and help them optimize their ARPDAU. And as a company, we also focus on helping studios with user acquisition.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Kristan Rivers. I'm co-founder and CEO of AdInMo. We're an in-game monetization platform. So we combine ads and IPs and other types of monetizations to try and help developers make more money from their games. And I guess the one thing that's kind of interesting to me throughout this whole conversation is, although we are a monetization platform, and I think most of the world kind of looks at us as probably billboards and games and ads that way, we fundamentally have always thought of ourselves as a data company. And how we talk about consented data and trusted data is an interesting topic as we are on the panel today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Oleksandr, or people just call me Olex, because, those long Eastern European names, that is hard to pronounce. I'm Senior Product Marketing Manager at Usercentrics, and we are doing CMP that definitely, looking on your faces, you really like and enjoy. But we don't do dull stuff, we do something interesting, and today we'll try to show you, together with all of my amazing colleagues, that this topic is very important, essential, and basically is changing and shaping the new world in which we already live. Thank you.
Yeah, Olex is absolutely correct. This is the third year we've all come together for this panel to see how the landscape is changing in this world of this increasingly important world of observing people's privacy in games. Before we get started, who in the audience are developers? Hands? This is great. Publishers? Yep. And any ad tech, martech people, indie studios? Indie studios? Indie studios, great. Ad tech, martech? Even better, we have the right audience here. This is great. Okay, so assisted by this, that's us lot. Assisted by this clicker, what we're going to talk about now first is the sort of trends that are happening. So I promised Sofia I wouldn't pick on her first. So, Kristan, what's happening in 2026?
That's why I sat down at this end, so I wouldn't have to get the first question. So look, I think 2026, and I'm still having to remind myself to say 2026 and not 2025, so bear with me. I think this is a year that privacy compliance becomes operationally imperative. This is, it's no longer an option. We've got a lot of trends coming down the pipeline, whether it's COPPA 2.0 compliance, the Apple and Google sending age verification signals, which I presume we're going to talk about here at some point as well today. This becomes the year that everybody has to think about this as a part of their business. Finally, and I know we've been talking about this, as you said, for 3 years, but now the thing that it opens up, and I know privacy is kind of boring if you're not as excited about it as I am, but it really does open up this concept of a trusted and consented relationship with your player is more valuable, and we can measure that. We've done case studies with Usercentrics where we can measure that uplift in terms of LTV, in terms of retention. So now, finally, it's no longer something that maybe a few of us are harping on about. Hopefully this is something that everybody is thinking about. So yeah, I think that's my takeaway for 2026 is this is no longer a checkbox. And again, I think we'll come into it a little bit as well. It's no longer a legal checkbox, which I think it was always viewed as. It's hopefully a part of the business and a part of the monetization stack.
Yeah, I'm going to pass over to Bozo. I mean, it's moved from afterthought more into the consciousness of the product set.
Yeah. I would say that we have to be really conscious that privacy is also a lot about perception, right? And what people hear about in the media, what their narratives are from the big companies such as Apple and Google. For example, I've seen just in the news as I was preparing for the panel that Jam City got fined by 1.4 million last year because they were fined as non-compliant under CCPA in the United States, which is a Californian privacy law, and under the same law, Tilting Point was fined $500,000. And I think that, and the reason why I'm mentioning this is because sometimes we need these signals as an industry that the regulators are actually paying attention, and this is something that triggers more publishers, even medium-sized and smaller-sized publishers, to actually act on these regulations. So I think that sometimes these are the signals that regulation is here to stay, that is going to be implemented, and let's say they're going to hold us responsible to these standards moving forward even more so. So I think this is something that we can expect in 2026. Apart from that, Kristan also mentioned we have Apple and Google who have to take responsibility now and are asked to collect user age and to pass those signals on to developers. I know there's been some delay in some of the US states, but Utah, Louisiana, I think they still have plans to implement it. So I think that more regulation is coming and more, let's say, accountability of publishers to actually align themselves with this is going to be the narrative of 2026 for sure.
So this time last year, we were saying still people were not really worried about being compliant. They thought that all the fines were just going to hit the big guys, if at all, if anybody was watching. Are you saying for 2026 this is going to be a different landscape?
Yeah, I think that the regulators also have to start somewhere, right? So they're going to start with the big guys. And once the entire industry sees that this is being regulated, is not only words on paper, it's not only something that somebody's saying, but they're not doing anything about it, then I think publishers will be more proactive to actually adopt those practices and say, okay, we don't want to get into trouble, because if you're, I don't know, Jim said or Tilting Point, maybe you can afford to pay $1 million fine, but if you're a mid-sized publisher, similar as with GDPR, they were threatening with fines of up to $20,000 or up to 5% of annual revenue. That was motivating enough for people to introduce some pop-ups and to start worrying about, I don't know, having specific sections in the privacy notices related to GDPR and to notify users about how they're using their data. So I think that these kinds of things can help push the industry a little bit forward compared to where we were 1 or 2 years ago.
For sure. I mean, you're one of those big publishers, Sofia. I do come to you now. How do you feel about these regulations for 2026?
Actually, fantastic. I know it's not expected. Well, unlike Jam City, compliance has always been a priority for us, and I just encourage all of you to see this from the positive side of things. For example, the age-verified signals, right? So prior to this change, how did we get the age of the player as a user input, which obviously was not ever accurate. Now we're going to have an extremely accurate data. It's verified, and it's something that you can have on your side. This is the zero-party data for you. So the possibilities or the opportunities you can look into can include an actual personalized user content. You can do personalized user experience, live ops, and of course advertising. So I would say we should all look into a safety by design approach in 2026 or more. And what you are going to get in return is like a sort of a clean room of verified data, which you can easily use to personalize to improve your gameplay and your games.
Great. So, sorry. Olex, carry on through on this one. So we're looking at now sorry, I was just playing with my notes, which was really stupid of me. So what do you see from a CMP distribution perspective?
So let's look on the numbers, which we have at the very beginning of 2026. If right now we'll try to measure the distribution of CMP through both of App Store and Google Play Store, we can see that around 60% of games, they already have implemented Google CMP. Around 35% still doesn't have any, and only 2% have a specific CMP that was developed by a CMP vendor. So basically what this data can tell us is that, like, starting from something good, already CMP is implemented in more than a half and more than 80% of games. However, on the other side, we can see that games have implemented very basic solution which limits the ability for customization, which limits the ability for providing some A/B testing, and what is more critical, it limits the ability for analytics. So basically, there is a really good quote that I like. You cannot control something that you do not measure. And without having a clear data what exactly is happening with CMP, how your players react on it, what they like, what they dislike, and etc., it's not possible to move on and step in. Because basically the second thing that we see in the very beginning of the 2026 is the rise of first-party data. And basically right now is becoming more and more important. And first-party data almost equal to CMP. You are not able to collect it in any other way.
For sure. Right, now I'm going to use the magic buttons. First-party data. Thank you. Good segue. So what have studios already done? What's the next thing? What's the biggest missed opportunities we're seeing in first-party data? I'm going to start with you, Olex.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, it really happened. A really good segue. So, continuing on my thoughts on the first-party data. First of all, we already can see that most of the studios have already figured out what data they collect. They already pass it to other vendors, to SDKs, whatever they need. However, in 2026, right now is the year when they have to learn how exactly to activate it and how to use it as an advantage on the market. The other thing that I also wanted to add here as some kind of missed opportunity that could rise is still treating CMP as a legal checkbox. So basically what happens, we hear a lot of things like this behind the curtains that I want to implement it and forget about it. But right now we already cannot talk about it in this way. Why is it so? Basically, right now, CMP is becoming a new conversion point inside of your funnel. And you have to think not only on how to optimize it, but what numbers do you have there, why it's working, or why it's not working, why it's working in this exact way, and etc. So the last point maybe to add here is also first-party data is having a big impact on attribution and analytics from the perspective that you have to start building new attribution models where you stop relying on something that you've used to do for many, many years, and you have to start relying on the new data. And I'll be a little bit brave and say that we are moving from the approach where we have more aggregated data speaking about our audience is coming from this source and doing this, to more human-faced, more player-faced analytics attribution, which I really hope will end with more enhanced gameplays, onboarding that are tailored not to a specific cohort, but they have more human face.
Well, user expectations are very different as well now as we all become digital or ingrained, grown-up digital citizens. We expect more from when we're having that first interaction, and user-centric CMP is that first interaction, isn't it? On the first-party data side of things, we've just got a good slide up here from you.
Yeah, maybe I can comment a little bit about that. I think that from the ad monetization side, because this is something I deal with on a let's say, daily basis, what we've seen, let's say, in early 2025 was that some networks were asking publishers to share some of the first-party data and were enabling them by, through the API to share some of the data that the publisher has but the network doesn't have. And the promise was, let's use that first-party data to actually improve let's say, the targeting that we have and to serve more relevant ads and consequently improve the eCPMs or how much money we're making for ads that we're showing. And in the beginning, I can name a couple of networks. It was Liftoff, Monetize, InMobi, but then last year, later in the year, Google, and this is what we see in this slide, Google actually went a step ahead, and instead of just saying, you can do it if you want, and this is how you can implement it through APIs and so on, Google just said, this is a new default. A new default is that the publisher first data is being shared with Google, and we are going to use it to optimize your traffic. And what we've seen in the reports that are available on Google AdMob is that eCPM of the impressions of ads that are served with first-party data being processed is 100% higher than of impressions that are served without any first-party data, which just goes to show how valuable this first-party data is, and that we should find a way to, as Sofia was mentioning, to kind of have clean data and to figure out how to use it in the best possible way. In this case, what I was explaining was for ad monetization, but Sofia was mentioning also on the app monetization or in-app purchase monetization, maybe early user funnels, or many, many different ways how we can actually use the data that we already have. And it's not necessarily personal, right? Because the regulators and we as users are usually mostly concerned with data that is highly personal, sensitive data, maybe even health data, things like that. But nobody cares if a lot of data is being processed on a super high level where there's no personalization and no attribution to an actual human being. In that case, we can just use it to leverage, to improve our products, right?
Kristan, you were nodding away vehemently there. Have you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, it was interesting. A couple thoughts on that. You know, we do still, as an industry, we think about first-party data as basically stopping at ad monetization. I mean, still, I think every time we talk about that, that kind of comes up. And the reality is, if we just look at this as ad monetization, as you're seeing, we're leaving a lot of money on the table. There's a whole bunch of other behavioral data that a properly defined, personalized monetization system can really extract, right? And it's things like understanding where your player is. What are their challenges? What are they stuck at this level? Are they progressing at that level? How are things happening with other players that hit that same spot? So that we're actually able to figure out the right offer to show that player. And that, sometimes the best way to monetize a player is not to show them an ad. And I think that's one of the things that we get stuck on is we have this silo of ad monetization and the silo of in-app monetization. And there's an in-between, right? And understanding where that player is in their journey to make sure that we're getting the right message to them at that right time. And that will help your retention, et cetera. So yeah, I think that's the more sophisticated developers and publishers are starting to view that type of data and using that first-party data for that way. And contextual is sometimes a bad word, right? And contextual is still a way to target a player, right? So even if we don't have the ability to personalize, there's still relevance in contextual. And I guess the final one, final kind of thought I was thinking about when you were talking about the evolution, and we've been on that as part of our business, is ad monetization, of demand partners requesting additional data and hopefully making better use of it is, I think the other thing that publishers maybe don't really appreciate, or developers, not all of them, many of them, but maybe not all of them appreciate, is that data is so valuable, and giving it away to your ad monetization partners, unless they're really giving you additional value for that, right? They're creating segments that are targeting these signals you're sending them. It feels to me like we're just spewing data out and not getting value back from that. And again, some of the more sophisticated ones that I'm seeing are actually withholding some of that data, unless you can prove that your ad monetization partners are doing something with it. Because they're selling that data later, right? Or they're using it in their own systems. So I think that's the other part of this, is just recognizing this is not just an ad monetization story. There's a data story here and the value of your data, and making sure that you exploit that as best as possible.
That's a really good point. Thank you, Kristan. So, actually, before we move on to my next question, which is about the core challenges for publishers, can I just get a show of hands on who here has actually implemented a CMP? Oh, we have a few. And can I just ask, is that Google, or have you got a Usercentrics CMP? Nobody's answering me here. Google.
Something called OneTrust in the US.
Okay. You know those? Yeah. Cool. Thank you. That's good. And who's considering implementing a CMP? Nobody yet. Okay. Good. They don't have to be sold to. Okay. So let's just go into what is actually blocking CMP adoption. She says, operating the channels. So core challenges. Yeah. So what's blocking the adoption? Let's move over to you, Bozo, quickly.
Yeah, maybe like we put this on this slide just to kind of show one of the multiple options publishers have when implementing a CMP. And for me, I think that working with different publishers, I think that's the biggest challenge for them, right? There are so many options, and for a savvy publisher, it's good to have options. That means that you can actually choose how you want to implement it. You can experiment with different options and then see what works best for you and for your users. But if you're a small publisher, it can be overwhelming, right? First, you need to make a decision whether you want to implement a CMP or not. Once you do that, you need to figure out which CMP provider you want to go with. We saw that some people in the audience have implemented Google. Olex mentioned that 60% of publishers who have implemented are using Google to show the CMP pop-up. Here in this example, we see two different, let's say, scenarios. One in where the pop-up also contains the reject all button, and the other one where it doesn't. And even though it's seemingly a very small difference in just showing an extra button or not, we actually know from the data that on pop-ups where reject all button isn't shown, we have 27% higher adoption rate. And so if you're just starting out and you don't have the expertise, or it's your first game, first app, you might just go ahead and implement all of the buttons that are available, and in that way you minimize the adoption rate and consequently your monetization and everything else. So I think that one of those challenges is just the overwhelming amount of options that publishers have and how to navigate to successfully implement a CMP.
And also, quite naturally, some people going into this first off could just see that as the be-all and end-all. Google's got it, it's there, it's a feature, I can use it, no problem. I'll just go and do that. But what we're kind of saying here is that it is actually one of your first touch points.
Exactly.
So just to consider all of those options now could really stop you leaving money on the table, as Kristan said.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the users are going to download your game, and the first thing they're going to see is terms of service privacy policy. The next pop-up they see is the CMP.
And that's their first relationship with you,
So you
which is
need to
bizarre. You think they're just downloading your game, but the first thing you hit them with is the pop-up.
Exactly. So they don't even know your game, but you're already asking them to do something for you.
Yeah.
And so this needs to be done the right way in order for them to kind of proceed and not quit, maybe even on this screen.
So really what we're saying is start viewing that pop-up as more of a value exchange to say, okay, if you do this for us, we might do this for you.
Exactly.
So we'll come on to that. Okay, Sofia, what are the potential challenges that publishers face? Because you are, again, from Zynga, you know this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's plenty, and for everyone, and you guys were kind of stealing my point, but I'll come to it now. I think, well, first of all, we see that, right, that not many people even want to implement the CMP. Now, imagine that you've decided, okay, we're going with a certain provider, Usercentrics, obviously, of course. And then you go ahead, and then you are just creating sort of like a unit, which is a privacy engineering, which you'll have to dedicate a ton of resources, starting with legal, then goes to data science, then data engineering is involved, and of course, the actual developers have to develop something for you. So that becomes a proper hurdle for any developer. It doesn't matter like the size, but I do imagine that not everyone can even afford privacy engineering department in your company. So that's by itself a huge challenge. And then you can also look at this, and that was the point we're about to steal, to the player. What our players will thank us for. Definitely not for the pop-ups that you open the game, open any game right now. You get ATT, you get terms and conditions, like you were saying, you get a CMP, then there is some kind of a welcome pack, then there is announcement on the live ops.
Push notification.
Push notifications, thank you. What else your player is going to have? And imagine just your first interaction with the game. So it's a minimum of 3 pop-ups. So that is something that is also cost your time, money, and resource. And at this point, it might be not extremely resolvable because of all of these regulations that are present and are coming.
Olex.
So first thing that I want to highlight, you've mentioned about that CMP is the first interaction with your game, brand, whatever, but I want to make the thought even a little bit wider. When we talk about players, we try to focus only what happens in games, and we forget that they are all real people who have different, much more different interactions, for example, with websites, with other apps, where CMP is already a part of user experience. And for example, whenever they open a website or install any app or a game where there is no CMP pop-up, they already feel concerned, like, what's going on here? Why is it's not present? Is it something suspicious? Is it something I'd better delete or quit if we talk about websites? So this is already a part of user experience, the way how it should be. This is like the first thing. The second thing is also the mindset that still circulates inside of the studios. So let's also have a look on it as user experience. When on a daily basis you have to face and operate multiple SDKs, mediation, pass the data from one system to another, plus here you also have to implement CMP, and then it comes with TCF, GDPR, CCPA, and you're completely lost. Yeah, that's too overwhelming. But doing any profession, engineering, marketing, product, it is still the same. It's very overwhelming. We have to know so many details. And what is the key issue is that still treating that CMP as something legal asked us to do. And when we have such feelings, we don't look and we don't try to unlock new opportunities, what benefits it can bring us, what advantages it can bring us, how we can start building trust from the very single step that our player take in a game, and then probably this will be like very good first experience when they see that, yeah, my choices are respected. And then, for example, we will implement the same strategy with showing ads, providing promises, and etc. So this is the first step of building trust. Just the last thought, you know, it's more like when you buy fish. There are only two types of fish. It could be fresh or not. The same here. You can start building the trust, and which will definitely impact your player engagement from the first step, or you won't.
Absolutely.
I was just going to add a little to that, only a little bit, because honestly, I was just looking at my notes here of bullet points I was going to touch on, and everybody here has already hit those. But I think that is the kind of critical takeaway here for publishers, is that it's just what everybody else has said, is that privacy, studios and developers look at privacy as the legal compliance bucket and monetization tools as the monetization bucket. They're the same thing. Consent engineering is part of your monetization platform, right? And we know, as AdInMo, we see, and we're a tool, we're an SDK. Every percentage point of consent that you get from your players directly translates to LTV, positive LTV, and positive retention. So trying to figure out, and I know, as a product person, I imagine, you have this challenge all the time in your studios, Sofia, is, looking at privacy and consent. It's not as much fun for your developers, right, as new features and new events and those sorts of things. But trying to figure out how to convey that this is, your monetization strategy is your consent strategy. There's no separation there. That's the key thing that I think every studio, every product team needs to take away.
And the sooner you do it, the better, basically. Just get that CMP implemented and don't ignore following up afterwards.
And do it well. Consent engineering, sorry to add one more thing to that, because it is, as Bozo said, it's a shitty experience for players, right? You launch your first game, it really is. And I was just thinking, Apple, they were sued, funnily enough, they were trying to push for privacy, right? But the reason they were sued and paid a fine in France is they made it too complicated, right? The French government said what they achieved in 2 or 3 pop-ups really should have been 1 pop-up. So back to, everybody should be thinking about what is that player experience, because that ultimately, if the player churns out, fucks off, you didn't make any money out of them.
I was waiting for the F-bomb. So taking a step on from where you were, Kristan, which is how we look at privacy as a revenue opportunity. So just moving straight into that, Olex, how can we make that turn in our mindset through from a privacy to a revenue op?
Amazing question. So what we definitely can say here is that when it comes to revenue, we can see like the final numbers on the dashboard. But if we want to impact it, we have to take so many steps back and see it from the perspective of view where it starts. For example, when you run your acquisition campaigns, and if you don't have CMP, you don't have Google Consent Mode implemented, it means that you log data. Then you go through wrong decisions. Basically, you can switch off the campaigns that are performing well, and your user acquisition turns from something data-driven to more like guessing. You're drinking coffee and looking, oh, okay, I think those campaigns are performing great, let's keep them. So basically, this is how privacy impacts your first steps, your first acquisition, and then, of course, it ends up with revenue. On the other hand, this is also a question how exactly you analyze your current players. If from the very beginning you start missing some data, then of course you won't be able to provide some hypothesis ideas and even see how those cohorts are playing in your game, what exactly they are doing, and understand if your last update or the new levels you've launched, if they are good, if players like them, and so on. So basically, if we try to imagine that, let's imagine something fancy, that in the end of the year you want to see your revenue with like a huge amount of coins. And basically, if you want to see that huge amount, privacy are the first layer. If that first layer is missing, then basically the whole thing collapses.
And then you can talk to contextual uplift in terms of making those revenues as well, Kristan.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump away from contextual for a second, though, and maybe even flip the question around, because we are here. How do we make more money, right? And there isn't a magic bullet. We know all that. I guess the other way to look at this, so instead of saying how to make more money from privacy, privacy isn't the magic bullet that's going to make, you turn on privacy, whatever you call that, and you make more money. We got privacy, now we're making more money. I said earlier at the start of this that at AdInMo we view ourselves as a data company, and consented privacy equals higher quality signal. So back to what Olex was saying, the better data you have, the better signal quality you have, the better decisions you can make, right? So as I said earlier, the more consented data you can get, the higher quality decisions you can make. Now, contextual is still good, right? A contextual player, a player that hasn't consented, they're not a lost player. They're just a player that has lower quality signal, right? So you still want to convert as many of those to high quality signals, but you can still make money from those folks as well. Contextual is relevance. So, but our starting point should be, how do we get as high quality signal from our players that we can action upon? But also recognizing, even if it's low quality, there's something there. You haven't lost that player because they didn't consent, but getting back to privacy engineering, trying to get as many of those to convert, is going to be better for everybody. So yeah, but that's I guess the kind of takeaway here is it's not how do I make more money from privacy, it's how do I get more signal, more high quality signal that I can make the right decisions to make more money from, and privacy is a part of that.
Bozo?
Yeah, I think that to what you were saying, Kristan, about the signals, I think that here on the slide we have a little bit of data coming from Google. And just as a reminder, the reason why we're talking about a CMP today in this room and last year in the room upstairs was because Google at one point just said, we need a CMP signal, a TCF signal for every single user if you want to show Google ads. That's it. And so because Google is such a significant provider in the space, that's why publishers went ahead and started implementing it early in 2024. And we can actually see from Google's own data how much higher eCPMs we have when there is a CMP implemented. So in the first graph, we see that eCPM of users where the data processing is allowed through a CMP, we have a 167% higher eCPM, and similarly, also the fill rates from Google Ad Network are going to be more than twice as high as when CMP is not implemented. So we can see that actually the CMP TCF signal that we get through CMP implementation actually translates into real money. And to what you were saying, Kristan, also, I think that what's interesting maybe to understand is that for the advertisers and for the entire pipeline there, it's not only important to get a yes signal, even getting a no signal, but the signal that contains certain elements, even on a technical perspective, will be more valuable than if you don't have a CMP at all. So I think that's also something important to stress out. Yes, it's important to maximize the CMP consent rates, but even having the CMP in the first place will be valuable.
Great. I'm going to skip on if that's all right, because I've just looked at the timer and we're burning through this time. So privacy become a marketing discipline then? That's really where we're moving it into. We've got a slide here, behind here. So where do we see this as part of the marketing mix? It's got to be sort of at the top of the funnel then, I guess. Yep. Olex.
Yeah. So first of all, let me comment a little bit on the numbers that you see right now on the screen. Those are basically the average consent rates for CMP through almost 2 last years. This data starts from the Q2 because in the Q4 we had Digital Marketing Act, which impacted a lot of new installations, and the data through that period is a little bit messy and not very relevant for analysis. But what basically we can see that during Q2 and Q3 there was like a learning phase where a lot of new CMP were implemented, and both game developers and players start dealing with it, using it, and numbers started getting higher. But starting from Q4 2024, the numbers are very stable. We can see a very small drop in Q4 2025, but we cannot even state that this is like a real drop. First of all, it could be just a measurement noise. Second of all, it could be it could be, and it is, that a lot of studios already like have a pretty level of maturity using CMP, so they move on into doing new tests, experiments, how they can get better numbers. Of course, some tests are going good, some tests are not so, but in general, that could impact that the numbers shifts a little bit. But in general, we already can state that 4 or 5 players already consent. And moving on to marketing, if we talk about consent rates, even by the rates and there is a conversion, it already feels like a marketing. And basically, CMP, as we previously said, they brought first-party data, like the main data, into our lives, and this is the common language between product, marketing, and ad monetization teams. So this is something that they have to share and talk in the same way, because especially what marketing can do with CMP, it's not only about experimenting and changing, I don't know, the layout, the color, the copy, when it's triggering, how it's triggering, but it also has to be very, very tight with acquisition campaigns, because you cannot test CMP like in a vacuum, that you've changed the color and now numbers got better. So this is basically the whole stuff that they are responsible for, which they have to connect and understand which exact their actions in acquisition campaigns end up with better users, and also thinking about how exactly CMP converts it like a middle step in that short funnel where like marketing stands in.
So we talked a lot about...
We're going to have to call it there.
Oh, wow, that's a brutal end there, Aaron. Oh, he's keeping us strict.
We've got to keep on schedule, well, I'm afraid. But,
thank you very much. Thank you, panel. Any questions that you want to ask any of the panel, please feel free to grab them as you see them around the building today. I'm sure anybody from ourselves or Usercentrics or Olex would be happy to talk to you. Thank you very much, and please thank my panel.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you so much.